My name's Peter Novosel. I'm CTO at SmartSuite. And I wanted to talk about automations today. This is actually one of my favorite features, so I'm excited to show it off. We've recently released a number of updates, and I will be showing you how to do a basic workflow and answer any questions that you have about the functionality. So we should have plenty of time for Q&A, but don't wait to the end. Just feel free to jump right in if there's a question. All right, so automations. Think of it as a workflow tool. What it lets you do is react to changes in data or status conditions or other values, and then take some action against that. You can find automations up in the solution menu. So they're anchored onto a solution so that you've got access to all of those applications and you can react to changes in specific apps or update or create records. We're going to see all kinds of different things. Just scroll down to automations and click, and you'll get a welcome screen if you don't have any automations configured. In this case, I do. I want to show you the end result of what we're going to do today, and then we'll go build this from scratch so that you can see what the process is. And here we have a number of different automations that relate to establishing a basic two-step workflow, which is a pretty common use case. And I'll just pick one of these to show you the components of an automation. An automation has two parts: the trigger, the when something happens, what conditions are we looking for, what are we reacting to, and then what are we going to do when that thing happens. And you can add up to 10 of these that fire on the same trigger. So I'll show that to you as we go, because at times you may want to create a record and update the record that triggered the automation, and you can do that easily. Inside the trigger, you'll see that you select an application. Just a note, we're actually in the process of making an enhancement here. Right now, you just get to select applications that are in the current solution. In the future, you're going to be able to select any application in any solution across the account. And that'll go for both SmartSuite triggers as well as SmartSuite actions. And I say SmartSuite triggers and actions because we're also adding a number of what we call direct integrations. So in addition to these SmartSuite triggers, right now we support firing on records that are created or records that are updated. We'll have an additional list of integrations, which you can already see in our action list. And the actions that we support today are creating records, updating records, sending a SmartSuite notification, which puts that little notification up in Notification Center, as well as sending email. But here you see our first direct integration. This is with a product called Twilio, and Twilio allows you to do things like make phone calls and send SMS. So we're supporting their SMS functionality. So if you have a Twilio account, you can link it and configure SmartSuite to send text messages, which could be handy in certain circumstances. All of that makes sense?
Thank you.
The second step are these conditions. So in addition to looking at this application, I want to see when my projects app is updated. I also want to say, okay, I want to know about updates, but only when my status value changes. And in this case, I'm saying I want to know about status when it changes from any selection to is exactly ready for review. You're also able to add additional conditions so that you could build a combination trigger that looks at multiple things across that record. A similar thing happens in actions where, okay, I want to update this record that just fired because it was picked up by this trigger. Now I want to make some updates to it. And when you configure these, you can add the fields that you would like to update, and then you select a value for those fields. The values available are going to depend on what the field type is. So if it's a selection list, like a single select or a multi-select, you can either select from the available options that are configured for that field, or you could actually pick up information or data that's come in from the trigger and use that data to set the value of the field. So hopefully that makes sense at a high level. I'll show you how this all comes together to create your automated workflow. So the result of these automations that I have configured already is this, and let me show you how this works. I've got a very basic projects application set up, and this just has a title. It's got a project type. I'm either going to build websites or I'm going to build e-commerce sites. I can assign it to someone who's going to do the work. That work has a status. It's going to start in not started by default. Then they'll work on it for a while and in progress, but at some point it's going to be ready for review. And that's where you're going to see our automation kick into gear, because when this assigned person sets the ready to review status, we're going to change the status in workflow phase 2, the reviewer. The review status is going to go from pending completion to ready for review. So let's see how that works. So say I am John, I'm working on my new project. I would initially set my in progress status and nothing happens over here. But as soon as I'm done and I set ready to review, there's a little bit of delay while it's processed, but you see that review status just changed to ready for review. That way, you could easily go in and create a new report. I'm just going to duplicate this report real quickly. And here, I'm going to set a filter on review status, and I only want to see things that are ready for review. So there, we've just created a review work queue in about 30 seconds. Makes it real easy to sort through and just see the things that are ready for your part in that workflow. Go back here to our all project report. So once I've completed that review, I might say, yep, this is great. I'm going to mark it approved. As soon as that happens, see that project status just flipped to complete. So now John knows that his project has been approved and everything's wrapped up. Now, in certain circumstances, you need a couple different options. I might have completed this project. I think everything's fine. It flips over to ready to review status. But maybe this manager comes in and takes a look and says, we didn't quite get everything just right. I'm going to suggest that we make some changes. When that changes needed state is set, it's going to flip this status back to in progress, telling the original developer that they need to go do some additional work. Now, maybe I go and do that work and say, yeah, I think that this is done. I'm just going to move it to complete. We always want to review before we get back to the customer. So it just flipped to ready for review and put it back in the reviewers queue. So you can use these techniques to make sure that everyone's kind of in alignment before things move forward. And then finally, you can go and say, yep, everything looks good now. And that will finalize the project status. All of that makes sense?
It totally does.
Excellent. So now I'm going to show you how to go about actually building that. So I've got another copy of this same solution, but in this case, I'll go to automations. We don't have any set up. So I'm going to say, yep, I would like to create my first automation. And the first thing that I want to add is I'll do that primary gate, that phase 1 to 2 gate, where I've completed the project work and I need to tell my reviewer that things are ready for review. So in that case, I'm going to say, I want to look at when this record is updated. So I'll pick projects, add a condition. I want project status. And you've got a bunch of options. I could say is not, is any of, is not empty. But in this case, I want to know when it changes. And I don't really care what it changes from. So I'm going to pick any. But I could look for it just changing from one particular state or the other. So when it changes from any state to is, and in this case, I'm going to pick an explicit choice and say when it changes to ready for review. That's the trigger for this action. And what I'm going to do is update the record by changing review status to an explicit value. In this case, it's already in pending completion, the default state. I'm going to change it to ready for review. Now, in addition, you can do some other neat things, like let's say you want to have a review due date, and you want the review due date to be 3 days from the current date when this was marked as ready for review. You can do that easily. In this case, I'm going to use data from the trigger, and I'm going to use last updated on. That gives you this record's last updated date, which would be right now because the record was just updated. But in addition to that right now time, I want to add an interval of, say, 3 days. You get 3 days before the review is due. So when this record triggers this automation, it's going to perform these two actions, making an update to review status and review due date. When you're all done, you click Add Automation, and it reminds you, hey, you can switch these things on and off. So if you're in the process of configuring an automation, you could say, no, I want to keep this off. I don't want it to fire until I'm completely done with specifying the actions that I want to have take place. But in this case, I'm just going to go and say, yep, I want to turn it on now. That it's listing this automation. You can give it a name, and let's actually go in and do that in just a minute. You can also duplicate them. So if you have a bunch of automations that are similar, but they need one little change, you can do that easily. You can also delete ones that you no longer need. And at any time, you can just click on the name to go back into it and make updates. We'll just call it ready for review. I'll save it again. It's going to preserve its on state. If you ever want to disable it, all you have to do is that. Just click it and it'll turn off. But in this case, I want to leave it on. So let's see if that works. Just click back into the record and let's change my another project record to ready for review. And what do you know? We're now in review status, ready to review, and we've set a date that's 3 days from now. So now my reviewer can come in, take a look, check it out. And now we want to be able to support the what we'll call the happy path. Everything's great. It's approved. We want to finalize the project. So to do that, go back to automations. We're going to say add new. I'm going to add a trigger. It's also going to be when a record is updated. It's also going to look at projects, but the condition is going to be just a little bit different. And say when review status changes from any value to is, and we'll use the static value of approved. That's the only condition we need to really care about at this point. We're also going to update the record. We're going to this time set project status to complete. And maybe we have a completion date, date completed. And I'm going to use the data from the trigger again. Last updated on. Incidentally, last updated by gets you the user that made the update. So now when this fires, it's going to make these two changes. Add the automation, switch it on. Once again, I forgot to name it. So let's go in and give it a name. Project approved. Save that change, close the automation. And now when I set approved, see that we just updated project status and date completed. Now we're done. But there's always that less happy path where it doesn't pass the approval stage. So for that, let's add an automation that looks at when the record is updated. Now this is where you're going to use multiple conditions. And in this case, we're going to look at review status. Again, changes from any to is exactly changes needed. Now we're once again going to go update the record, and we'll change our project status back to in progress. That's all we need to do to put it back into their queue, because they're presumably going to be filtering on an in progress status. If you wanted to get a little fancier, you could also add a status for rework needed or additional attention required or something to tell them that it's just come back in the workflow. Let's switch that on. Oh, it's not approved. We'll put our other record into the review cycle. Nope, not quite ready. So now we're back in progress. Now, maybe somebody is going to try to circumvent the review process and just go and set their project status to complete. We can detect that. And this is actually where we're going to use multiple conditions. So when a record is updated in projects, you can say where project status changes from anything to is complete and review status is not approved. So if they just try to skip over the review process, we're going to add an action that updates the record and sets project status back to ready for review, which incidentally is going to trigger the other automation, which will change the review status to ready for review. So you can have a compound effect and trigger multiple things at the same time.
Hey Peter, Sheila has a question. If another option is added to the drop-down menu, will that new option remain when software updates are rolled out?
If a new, let me make sure I understand the question. So if a new option is added to which menu?
The drop-down menu. So for example, additional work required on the status field, that new option remain when there's software updates that are rolled out?
Yes. Yep. You'll see new options become available. Existing options should remain. So there's nothing that would remove them unless you delete the option, in which case it's going to basically be an empty value, like you hadn't selected anything here. Do we have any other questions? No?
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
If we were to change that status, if they tried to go around, do the unhappy pathway and go around and change it to complete when it wasn't improved, would we send like an email notification as well? So we can add another action to notify like the reviewer that
Yep.
whatever. Okay.
You absolutely can. And that's a great segue into send a notification. So let's do that here. So when this condition occurs, so when project status is changing to complete and review is not approved, we're both going to set the project status back to ready for review, as well as send a notification. And who are we going to send this to? We're probably going to send this at least to whoever's assigned. And you could also send it to arbitrary people. There are options to add PCs and BCCs. You can change the name that it's coming from. So you've got a little bit of flexibility. In-app notification, if you specify something here, it's going to show up in Notification Center, which is the little icon right about here in the toolbar. We're going to say this project requires review prior to closure. Again, here the subject, I can either type something explicitly, or I could do something like come in and say, I want to add the title field, which is the name of the project in this case. You've also got the builder that allows you to requires, and you've got some rich text options here as well. So I could make this bold. This is another area where we're making some improvements. You'll eventually have, this will look much more like a Smart Doc field where you have formatting options and all of that kind of good stuff. But in this case, we'll just also drop the title, and maybe you want whoever's assigned to it. There's also a shortcut here. You can use this to just select fields that you would like to have included in kind of in a table at the bottom of the email if you just want to include a whole bunch of information from the record. And that's it. These two will fire simultaneously. So whenever this trigger fires, it's going to do both of these actions. So let's go try it out. Make sure everything is on. And here, let's open this up. It's assigned to me. I'm in progress. It's in changes needed. I'm going to move to complete. I just want to be done with this project. Yep. It just toggled both of these. And my notification's still taking a little bit of time, but that'll show up as well. And then as soon as I try to complete it again, I'll just see that you'll see it toggle back. And then finally, okay, yep, we're good to go. and project status will update and date completed is filled out. All of that makes sense. There's your basic two-step workflow in 4 automations. Any questions?
Peter, are you able to create a new linked record through automations?
That's a great question. Yes, we are. And yeah, let's do that. Here, maybe we want to, you can see that I've got a tasks application, and here's our linked record field. I could go and manually create a task and save it and attach it to the record. But you're also able to do that with automation, which can be handy. Let's say that every time you create a project that is of type set up e-commerce site, you want to create a task record to track whether or not you've configured Stripe, say. And we could do that with an automation. So let's go build one. This also shows off another trigger type, which is when record is created. So this will be when it is initially generated, whether it's through an automation, a manual action, Zapier, the API, anything. As soon as the record shows up, it's going to trigger unless you set additional conditions. And in this case, we will set an additional condition because maybe these tasks are only appropriate to certain types of projects. So I'm going to say when my project type is set up e-commerce site. And in this case, we're going to use one of the other action types. This time we're going to create a record. So instead of selecting projects, we're going to select tasks. And here's the trick to doing this. When you create the new record, here we'll give it a title and we'll say, well, for project, and we'll use, again, the title field. So we're going to dynamically generate this title. So the task will be configure Stripe for project ABC company. And we're going to add a field linked to projects. This is the other side of the linked record field. And what I'm going to do here is set the title field's value in that linked record. That's going to drop that value into the new record that we're creating in tasks and link it back to the triggering project. So that's the trick to getting your linked record automatically generated and attached to the right record. Let's switch it on and see if we can. We'll save that and let's add our link to tasks. Be a little bit of a delay as it gets to it. Make sure that I actually did select the right conditions. Record is created, projects where type is set. Oh, there's the problem. We didn't set the type to be e-commerce. So it's following my rules, but I gave it the wrong set of rules. So let's do this for Acme. In progress. I'll assign myself. Say due date is Friday. And let's go. There we go. There is our linked record. You can see over in tasks, Acme e-commerce, configure Stripe. And it linked the record for us automatically. There you have it. We've actually done this on a number of occasions. We have a customer who's using SmartSuite for business continuity and recovery plans. And anytime they activate a plan, we go and find and attach or create the appropriate response actions that they need to take to remediate the problem. And those vary by type. So very similar workflow process, but a very different business process. Any other questions that I can answer for you or scenarios that you wonder if we can build out or?
Peter, are you able to trigger off a formula field?
Yep, you actually can. And triggering off of a formula field is a nice trick to do more complicated things. Formulas are going to be the topic of another one of these webinars. So we'll go through formula creation in another one, but for now, we'll just create a quick formula. We'll go to the advanced editor and we'll say project status or review. Set this to yes, otherwise we'll set it to no. Arbitrary, but let's see, where is my just text? When you're in the automation builder, and I Didn't manage to save the field. Demo fail, but yes, they will show up. I've used them in a number of circumstances to. One of the limitations right now that I should mention is that the update a record function is just available on the triggering record. We're actually expanding this functionality to allow you to find, search, and set criteria to select other records to update. Right at the moment, you can only update the current record, but through a linked record, you can create a formula that changes a value in that linked record and use it to trigger its own automation to go do something. So formulas can be pretty handy when it comes to configuring these things, especially right now while you're limited to the current record. But that's actively in the works and should be available soon. Any other questions?
Looks like Sheila had a question.
Okay. Sheila?
I think it's in the Q&A panel.
Okay.
Can the automation open a task in Jira? And if so, Zapier is used in that process?
So automations will, Jira is on our list of things that we want to go automate. So we're intending to add Jira on both sides. So as both a trigger. So when something happens, changes is created in Jira, we could trigger off of that, as well as taking action in Jira, either creating a ticket in Jira or updating something. It's not available yet, obviously, but that is high up in the priority list. The Google Suite, the Microsoft Suite, including email and calendar, as well as Drive and OneBox or OneDrive. And then Jira and Zendesk are all high up on the list. Great question. Anything else people are wondering about? Okay. Automations is one of the features that we're very hard at work on. We've got a long list of things that we want to add. The capabilities will only continue to become more advanced. We would love to have all of the core things that people have to go and use Zapier for be covered by direct integration so that you can consolidate everything in SmartSuite. Just as a sidebar mention, we also have integration with make.com, which used to be called Integromat. A whole bunch of people use that platform as well as Zapier. So we're also looking at integration with it for those systems that we don't have direct integrations with. But that list will grow. This was the biggest chunk of work, is just setting up a system that allows us to dynamically add these. And now we've got a structure where we can wire it up on the backside, and these integrations know how to present you with the correct options to configure them. So we're going to be adding them at a rapid pace. While we're at it, I'm also going to point out that all of these things are available for you to see if you go to Help Us Improve SmartSuite here in our intercom panel. If you click into that, you can actually see all the different categories of feature requests and see what's actually planned, in progress, completed, in the backlog. All of it is available to you right here. And it will also be part of the community site that we'll be announcing shortly. We want to create some environments and places where people can come and talk and share great ideas or use cases for automations and formulas and all of the great stuff that comes together to automate your work. All right. Oh, Sheila's unable to unmute, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it. If you do have additional questions, feel free to follow up. You can email me and I will be happy to get back to you. And keep an eye on our product updates because we'll have many more of these direct integrations available soon.
Thank you so much, Peter.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Sheila, thank you for attending. And as I say, we will be in touch. And if you have questions, just ping me anytime. Thanks very much. Have a great day.